Hallo, schön, dass du wieder mit dabei bist bei der neuen Episode unseres Podcasts Erlebnis Irland. Möchte ich von unseren Erlebnissen im Templehouse erzählen. Templehouse, das ist ein irisches Herrenhaus im Nordwesten der irischen Republik in Sligo. Wie der Name schon andeutet, ist Templehouse ein sehr altes Maison, dessen Geschichte bis zu den Tempelrittern zurückreicht. Entsprechend ist es nicht nur spannend, dort das Anwesen und die Ruinen der Templerburg zu fotografieren, sondern auch das Herrenhaus bietet einige sehr spannende Ideen für uns. Wenn du mehr wissen willst, dann hör dir diese Episode an. Viel Spaß dabei! Der Anfang dieses Jahres war etwas turbulent, aus persönlichen wie auch aus familiären Gründen. Deshalb waren wir dieses Jahr nicht mit einem Workshop in Irland unterwegs, sondern wir haben einfach beschlossen, Irland auf eigene Faust alleine zu erkunden. Und dieses Mal war der Norden der Insel dran. Und zwar von Nordirland, von Belfast, über Sligo, über Mayo zu der Nach Irland. Dabei waren wir mindestens eine Woche in Sligo und in unserer Unterkunft lag ein sehr spannendes Buch über die Gegend. War jetzt nicht direkt ein Reiseführer, sondern eher so ein Geschichtsbuch über die Geschichte der Gegend. Und in diesem Buch fand ich mehrere Sites, mehrere Sehenswürdigkeiten, die auf Privatgrund liegen. Darunter war eine Templerburg. Jetzt müsst ihr wissen, dass ich sehr geschichtlich interessiert bin, hauptsächlich auch von der Antike bis ins Mittelalter. Und dazu gehören selbstverständlich auch die Templer. Und das wäre für mich natürlich eine ideale Fotogeschichte gewesen, ein super Motiv. Es war es aber so, ich habe gesehen auf Google Maps, als ich das recherchiert habe, das muss auf einem Privatgelände liegen. Dann habe ich zu meiner Frau Fee gesagt, du, ich würde da zwar gern fotografieren, aber so richtig Bock, um Erlaubnis zu fragen, habe ich eigentlich nicht. Das lassen wir aus, fahren wir weiter nach Eckhill. Dann hat meine Frau gemeint, nö, da gehen wir hin, das bereust du sicher, wenn du nicht hingehst. Wie recht sie hatte, das wird sich dann im Laufe des Podcasts rausstellen. Auf jeden Fall sind wir dann dahin gefahren. Das Ganze hieß Templehouse. Das war, wie ich schon erwähnt habe in der Einleitung, ein irisches Herrenhaus. Wir da also auf den Parkplatz gefahren mit größtem Recht, das Auto abgestellt, ausgestiegen. Schon kam ein jüngerer Herr aus dem Hause geeilt. Ja, das ist Privatgelände und so. Dann hat meine Fee gemeint, meine Frau, ja, schon, aber Sie haben ja auch ein Bed and Breakfast. Wir machen übrigens auch einen Podcast, wir würden Sie vielleicht gerne interviewen und wir würden auch mal gerne bei Ihnen übernachten. Aber vor allem würden wir gerne mal die Tempelburg-Ruine fotografieren. Ja, wieder erwarten, nicht wieder erwarten, weil die Iren sind eigentlich in der Regel recht nette Leute. Meine Frau hat dann, oder wir haben dann das okay gekriegt, ja, ist in Ordnung, ihr könnt Bilder machen. Ich war gerade dabei, meine Ausrüstung aus dem Auto zu laden, kam ein etwas älterer Herr, ja, vielleicht in meinem Alter, gemächlicher aus dem Gebäude, hat uns angesprochen, ja, ihr seid das Team, das mit den Podcasts und mit dem Fotografieren und so weiter. Hättet ihr nicht Lust, mit mir einen Kaffee zu trinken? Das war dann eine sehr unerwartete Wendung Und so sind wir mit Roderick Parcival in seinem persönlichen Arbeitszimmer, für mich eigentlich eher in einem Salon gelandet und haben uns ganz nett unterhalten. Um was es dabei gegangen ist, was wir so gesprochen haben, das könnt ihr jetzt dann hören. Ich übergebe jetzt an Fee und Roderick Parceval.
Hallo, wir sind heute haben viel Glück gehabt. Wir dürfen ins Tempelhaus und der Besitzer wird uns jetzt einiges über das Tempelhaus erzählen und die Geschichte. Jetzt eine kleine Einführung, würden wir uns jetzt freuen. So, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello, my name is Roderick Parceval from Templehouse Estate in County Sligo, which is in the northwest of Ireland. We're about 20 minutes from the Wild Atlantic Way.
How long does Templehouse exist?
Well, I think I might go further back than that. So my family actually originated from Normandy, and then we spent about 600 years in England, and then we landed in Ireland and Templehouse in 1665. That's when a chap called George Percival married a Mary Crofton, who lived down near the lake. And at the lake, which is right beside Templehouse Lake, there's 3 buildings, 3 ruins. The earliest is from the Knights Templar, and the first mention of the Knights Templar is in 1189. We think that the Knights Templars were probably invited here by the Anglo-Normans. We can't see that there'd be any justification for trade here, but we don't really know. I imagine the waters were different, the rivers were different then, but certainly the Knights Templars were here. And then when they were disbanded, you had either they became the Knights Hospitallers or Knights of St. John. Literature is a little thin on the ground, but either way, the castle continued. And then the property changed hands over the centuries. The O'Haras, MacDonalds, O'Garas, O'Connors, all would have had an influence amongst others. And it was the O'Haras who built a lovely square tower. For those who are able to go to our website, templehouse.ie, you'll see pictures of all these things. And they built that between 1360 and 1460. And actually the O'Hara family are still local. Durcan O'Hara was my best man, and in actual fact my great-grandmother was an O'Hara as well. And then the third building down by the castle was a red brick Tudor house, which was that sort of period, built in 1627. Thatched house, quite unusual architecture. It wasn't fortified, but there was a fort around these 3 buildings until about the 1920s. And then it was the Croftons, we think, probably arrived here in the 1500s, but we certainly know that they were here in 1609, and it was the granddaughter of Henry Crofton. Her name was Mary, who married George Percival in 1665, and that's how we landed in County Sligo. Then the first dwelling up at the big house, and the big house, it is a big house. If you were in France, you would call it a castle. I imagine if you're in Germany, you probably call it a schloss, but here we can't call it a castle because it's not castellated, which is very annoying, because we'd like to do more weddings, and people like to get married in a castle, but it is a beautiful, beautiful building. It's quite large, but it is a family home. But it's large for a couple of reasons. The first dwelling up here was about 1760. The second grand house was 1825, and then the third was 1864, and there's reasons for that. So in 1825, it was you had to show off. So there was some lovely, lovely limestone, cut stone from a place called Ballisadair, which is between us and Sligo. And it was a nice but relatively modest Georgian house. And then what happened was that in 1847, my great-great-great-grandmother, her name was Jane, she died of famine fever. She was out with her daughters feeding locals and tenants and so forth, and she caught famine fever, which was typhus. And then 10 years after that, or thereabouts. Her husband, my great-great-great-great-grandfather, he died. And then combined the famine with death duties, the eldest son just had to sell up. And so for 4 years, this property was in the hands of another family. Unhappy times, actually, but the former tenants, some former tenants, and the former agent wrote out to the second son and said, would you ever come back? And he'd actually married very well, and he was a King's yachtsman out of Cowes in the south of England, so he was not going to come back to County Sligo, thank you very much. But the third son was in Hong Kong. His name is Alexander, and he was working with Jardine Matheson. He was a barrister actually by profession, but it was, of course, there was a lot of trade then, and he did awfully well for himself. He came back, repurchased property, knocked down half of it, and then rebuilt it and made it far too big. So we're now sitting in a room which used to be his study, actually, and then the room behind me is a smoking room, and these ceilings are, I suppose, must be at least 5 meters high, enormous windows, beautiful big windows. And then you had a smoking room, then you had his billiard room, which is where we're actually hosting yoga today, which is why I'm sorry I can't show you around much more around the house. And then he had, next time, absolutely right. And then he had his own gun room and his own exit. He didn't have a shed out the back, he had a whole wing to himself. But sadly, he didn't have it to himself for very long, because age 44, he died in 1866. Okay. But just bad luck, but it's a family home he created, and we're still here. And then I suppose I'm going to fast forward to the late 1800s, where my great-grandfather, he was brought up in a house full of staff. And then he went off to the First World War. It wasn't much fun. He came back, he had PTSD, and big houses in Ireland, well, big houses after the war, especially in Ireland, were very much out of place. And so he was married, his children dispersed, and then by the 1950s, in about 1957, he was widowed, and he was living in this house on his own. That's all very well, but when this house has 97 rooms, it must have been horrible. So actually, this was his study. So he lived in this room, he lived in what was his dressing room, and then the kitchen was downstairs. There's actually 32 rooms in the basement. And if you can imagine living in this house on your own when you've been brought up with 12 staff, it must have been quite tough. So the house was pretty much empty for quite some time. But then my grandparents were brave enough to move in the early 60s, and they sort of patched up the roof, put some electricity in about 1962. Before that, every time we'd asked it, we were told there was insufficient demand in the area for electricity. So we made our own gas until 1957. And then it was my parents who moved in here in about 1976, and they started the bed and breakfast business, which is how you stumbled across it, I think. They started the bed and breakfast business in the early 80s, just a few small rooms. My wife and I took over in 2004, and so we've continued in that same vein, bed and breakfast, historic house bed and breakfast, I think we should call it. It's slightly different, but it's still the same principle. You're welcomed into our home. You can actually enjoy your bed and breakfast, and then we do dinner for residents. And then on the odd occasion, we'll do dinner for small parties for special occasions and things like that. And then what we really enjoy is filling the house of 3 generations for a 50th birthday party or an 80th birthday party or an anniversary or something like that. And then, of course, we do a few weddings as well. We're a country house and we do weddings. I think there's an important distinction that we're not a country house wedding venue. This is still a home lived in, and we'll do what it takes to pay for the roof because it's a very large roof.
Yeah.
But the estate runs to about 1,000 acres. You'll have to do the conversion into hectares. What is it?
Oh, that's quite a lot.
Okay. It's something like 400 something hectares, I can't remember. So there's about 400 acres of grass, which is about 286 hectares of grass. The land is okay. And I mean, I went to college to do agriculture. That's what I enjoyed when I was doing when I was growing up. But the farm, when I came back, just couldn't support 2 families. So we'd make money and then I'd give it to the shepherd and then I'd get a headache or some pocket money. So now we've let most of the property out, but we've retained the parkland for some sheep, and it just allows me to continue to farm, in inverted commas. And then we've got about 600 acres of woodland. Most of it is native woodland or natural. I don't like the conifers myself, probably should from a commercial point of view, but there's plenty of that around the place elsewhere. So we manage that for woodcock shooting, woodcock hunting. I don't know what woodcock is in...
I think that's Tonscherben schießen.
I don't remember. Yeah, woodcock. It's a wonderful sport.
So you have that pottery that you throw up. Is that correct?
I don't know. I'm not sure. No, but the woodcock it's very challenging, and so the way we work is we have shooting parties, which means that a bunch of friends, with or without wives and partners, it doesn't really matter. You come for a house party and you bring a gun.
Okay.
And that is the attitude. You're not coming here for numbers, you're coming here for the sport and the social aspect. And we really enjoy that during the winter. So managing the woods is important from that perspective. And then we have an ambition to use our own wood chip to heat the house. At the moment we use logs, but I'm getting a bit tired of lifting logs into the boiler. I want to use wood chip from an automatic point of view, but there's a lot more moving parts, but I think it's the right thing to do. We were actually looking at it even before the various happenings over the last number of months. So that makes sense. And then we've got a lake. For fishing is another thing. Pike, we have enormous pike. Recht, I think, is that right? Huge. So we're talking, you're going to have to convert, 120 centimeters plus is very possible. Wow. We have pictures on the mantelpiece in the front hall and on a website. And, you catch them, you take a picture, you congratulate yourself, and then you put it back.
That's the best way, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And we have perch and bream and others, but I think Templehouse Lake is very well known for the pike. And actually we have boats for hire, even if you don't stay. Okay. If you stay, you get the boats for free.
Oh, that's lovely.
In actual fact, we can do the same thing, when we have done with French and German parties, actually, where you come for a fishing party. So you come for a house party and you bring rods. It's good. It's fun. And then on the property, we've also got some ring forts. We've got some beautiful, beautiful old trees in the parkland, but also all around the estate. And this is home, and I love it.
That sounds like a great holiday if you come here.
Yes, it is. And I think you need, in County Sligo, you spent something like 5 nights, I think. You've been doing lots of research and enjoying time with your family. I would say in County Sligo you need minimum of 2 nights, because and you'll always find, but preferably 3 nights. And if you can afford more time, you can fill 5 days, as you've discovered yourself. We're right beside the coast, the Wide Atlantic Way, which is really beautiful. And Sligo, I believe, is largely undiscovered. The southwest, the west, Connemara, the Burren, Kerry, Cork, has been high on the list of the tourist boards, but Sligo somehow has always been modest, and it shouldn't be, because it's beautiful. We've got the coast, we've got the hills, we've got the lakes, we've got the culture in terms of W.B. Yeats, we've got fantastic music. You go to pubs in the evening, there's fantastic music, there's spontaneous music as well. Lovely food, really good seafood. Surfing, of course, if you're into that sort of thing. You can do we've got boats on the lake here, but we've also got stand-up paddling, canoeing, kayaking on the lake here, arranged by another chap. But what I like about Sligo is that within 45 minutes, you can reach all of those things. Whereas in other parts of the southwest, you have to drive for an hour or an hour and a half to get from A to B. In Sligo, it's all here. It's very, very easy. It's a little over 2 hours from the motorway going around Dublin. If you can fly into Knock Airport, we're 35 minutes. You don't need, I mean, Knock Airport is beautifully small, so flights are limited, but it's never crowded and it's very easy. Shannon Airport is another option. We're less than 2 hours from Shannon Airport now. And from County Sligo, you can reach the north coast. Giant's Causeway, if you haven't got time, to do a full circuit, you can actually do the Giant's Causeway in a day trip. It's a long day trip, but otherwise from here you can go to Slieve League, County Donegal, and that's a day trip and a very achievable day trip. And up to Ardra was a lovely place up there, a Glengash Pass, and then back down again, stopping off in McGee's for your Tweed in Donegal town. And then between us and Donegal town, you've also got Mullock Moor, where the famous Classy-Bourne Castle, and it's also a fabulous spot for surfing, serious surfing there. There's a lovely restaurant there called Ethna's Restaurant, seafood restaurant, it's special, isn't it? It's seasonal, so it probably won't be open during the winter, but that's normal. Water sports there. Come around the coast to Ross's Point. More water sports and just beautiful spots all around Ross's Point. Lovely, really good golf course, actually. So you've got Ross's Point or the Sligo golf course, championship golf course there, Strand Hill, Enniscrone, all within 45 minutes. So you can park your car at the hotel or your suitcase in somewhere wherever you're going, preferably Templehouse. And you can do your 3 championship golf courses, and they are lovely. Really beautiful. There's also a parkland one at Castle Dargan and others in the area. Strand Hill, of course, you've got Knocknarea, Queen Maeve's Cairn, and you've got Carrow Moor, which is the megalithic tomb, which I believe you'll probably be speaking about another time. But what's really lovely, if you go to Carrow Keel, which are the megalithic tombs, where you can actually crawl into the tomb. It's not commercialized or anything, and people are beautifully respectful of all these things now. If you go into the tomb and look out the passageway from the tomb, you're looking directly at Queen Maeve's Cairn on top of Knocknarea. I just love that. That's beautiful. Lots of beautiful spots around here. Oh, I mean, this is the whole thing. There's so much that's undiscovered, and such variety too. You can keep going around the coastline. You've got Rosie's Pottery, which is what we use for our breakfast set in Easkie. Easkie's more surfing, of course. You've actually, my favourite spot is this Ochris Head, where you've got the beach bar at Ochris, and you can park your car, go for a walk as far as where you want, and then turn around and come back again for your pint of Guinness or your cup of coffee or whatever you want. And in season they'll do food, and it's just a lovely spot because what you're doing is you're looking across the water. There's geese often there as well. Across the water to Knocknarea, Ben Bulben, Sligo's own tabletop mountain, which you can climb actually. You can climb Ben Bulben, but you need to be experienced and you do need to get the weather right. So and good shoes. So just be careful doing that one. And then all the way up on a clear day to Slieve League, which I mentioned. Slieve League is actually higher. Those cliffs are higher than, Cliffs of Moher, absolutely. And then you can keep going around the coastline again. You've got Easkie, you've got Enniscrone golf course, of course. Enniscrone has got seaweed baths, so too does Strand Hill. And Strand Hill's got some nice eateries, and it's just a nice place to visit. And keep going around to Ballinar, and then you're off along the coast to Achill, or Belmullet, which is actually the northerly part. There's so much to do. It's a different world out there, completely different world. The Belmullet, on the way out there, you've got the Cage of Fields, which I suspect you can cover off another time. But inland in County Sligo, you've got Loch Arrow comes to mind for your trout fishing. You've got Loch Key, which would be sort of on the border with Roscommon. You've got trout, and you've got the coarse fishing as well. There's just so much. Yeah.
So much to do.
There is. I've rambled on for far too long. Don't worry. Yeah.
So Parcival is your name. So from Normandy, do you have something to do with legend too?
Well, we choose to believe that is the case. We choose to believe that's the case. And I mean, there's not many Parcivals around, so it must be true. But we can trace our family back to about 800 and something, where Aslin Govard de Parceval, my best French accent, was defending his castle in Bataille de Ivry. Mm-hmm. And then we know that we landed in England in 1066 and meandered our way across England there. But yeah, look up Parcival. He's a very clever guy. Yes, so our name would have been de Parcival, and that was dropped, over the years. But if you have, I think the interesting thing here is the Knights Templar Castle and why on earth they were here. But then actually, when you think about just how many historical sites, I mean, from the garden, lovely, beautiful terrace gardens. If you stand in the gardens, you look down across the terrace gardens, and you've got the castle, and you've got the lake, and then you can see a crannog, which is an island, a man-made island, which was just a hideaway, and actually used up until the 1600s, I'm told. I don't know very much about it, and they're not very big, but but there's two crannogs on Templehouse Lake, actually. And then if you Google it, there's another stony island beside one of the crannogs on the northerly end, and that was my grandfather, who had two brothers who claimed the two crannogs. So he said, well, look at that, if they've got an island, I'm going to make my own. So he did. And then on the southern tip of the easterly shore, there's a ring fort as well, which you need to access that from a boat there. But that's beautiful underneath mature beech trees. We're not sure if it actually is 40% of Ireland's megalithic activity and sites are in this region. Really beautiful.
When is the best time to visit you?
Well, we open in April and we finish sort of mid-November. I would say May, from May is what I would say, unless you can't get away in it, but I would say from May right through to the end of October. May invariably has a couple of dry weeks. In Ireland, you don't come here for the weather. But my opinion is you never have a bad weather, you just have bad clothing, the wrong clothing. So if you take that attitude, you're fine. And I mean, if you go to Connemara and the cloud comes in or the rain comes in, the atmosphere is fantastic. You may not see the top of the hills, but it's really, really memorable. I would say May, September, October is when the colours change. And then sort of November, beginning of November, you're turning into winter. But it depends what you're looking for, really. May or September would be mine. But no, October, I don't know. Because October, the colours are so beautiful. But if you can only get in July, August, well, come in July, August.
And you said before that you had musicians over here yesterday.
Yes. Well, we actually hosted a beautiful concert, just an intimate concert here. We do that on the odd occasion, but if you land in County Sligo, the Sligo town has a sort of a website, and it's well known where music is played in each pub each evening. So if you're eating in a restaurant, you'll say, "Where's the music tonight?" and they'll point you in the right direction. But here we've hosted small concerts, we've hosted yoga parties, we've hosted sort of sound retreats, anything you can think of, we do it. Photography. The beauty of Templehouse is the fact that we've got sufficient number of rooms to fill the house without it becoming too impersonal. So it's still intimate, which is rather nice. And we do all the food and so forth. So, you can arrange a bus and you can come here, and then for excursions you can organise the bus again if you're a group. But actually, if you're coming to Ireland on your own, you really do need to hire a car or bring your own. Mm-hmm. You will miss so much if you don't have your own transport. The public transport is okay at best in Ireland, but if you want to enjoy everything, you've got to drive for sure. Okay. But it's not a hardship. The roads are a lot better now. Actually, thanks largely to German money over the years, so thank you very much.
Yeah, I heard that they started off building the roads in the 90s, correct?
90s, but even if you go back to the 80s too, but 90s, we're still trying to build roads. If you talk to Americans, they look at a map And they think, oh yeah, I can do that, no bother. But what they don't realize is that there's something to look at over every hill, and you get stuck behind a tractor if you're on a smaller road, because that's what happens. And you just have to go at a different pace. But that's good. Yeah. That is good.
Yeah, a friend of ours told us on the Eccles that you have the sheep as to slow traffic down.
Absolutely right. Absolutely, you have sheep to slow traffic down. The other thing I think is when you go to some beaches and there's 2 people on it, you think, oh God, it's crowded. You know, that's a lovely thing. I mean, if you go around Donegal, Sligo, much of the coastline, you're not going to have the hordes of people, and that's just beautiful.
You offer breakfast at a bread and breakfast. What is the typical breakfast in Ireland about?
Well, typical?
Breakfast in Ireland?
Oh, well, what we do is we have the regular cereals and so forth, and then we make our own homemade granola, and then we do something slightly different. We have rhubarb from our walled garden, and then a beautiful Greek-style yogurt, and then, of course, you have the full Irish, and that's your rashers, your bacon. And then you have your black and white pudding, which is essential. Everybody must try that. Your bloodwurst, I think you call it. Some people just run a mile, but actually it's rather nice. And I like the puddings with marmalade. People think I'm bonkers, but it's delicious. You should try it, but not with egg at the same time. And then your tomato and some... So really, that's the... But don't have baked beans. If you want that, go to England. That's my opinion. Okay. But, you know... but that sets you up for the day, for sure. And then, but something you must do is try the seafood in the evenings. If you can, you must include that. And of course, the beef and all the lamb, because it's the Irish food actually doesn't get the recognition, or is beginning to get the recognition in more recent years that it's deserved, because we've got some fabulous produce and fabulous chefs and cooks all around the place, for sure. But I think you just, when you come to Ireland, set your clock slightly differently and just accept that it's slightly slower, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, people and animals, we find out, are more relaxed here than in other parts of the world.
Yeah, no, I think the, I mean, I lived abroad for 10 years, but I wouldn't change anything in Ireland. It's fantastic.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and for your interview.
Thank you very much indeed, and I hope to see lots and lots of people here in the northwest at Templehouse. Thank you.
Hope so too. Thank you.
Das war jetzt das Interview mit Roderick Parcival und mir. Nachdem das Mikro aus war, ging es noch etwas weiter, weil Roderick Parcival hat uns noch ein paar Räume gezeigt. Und es kamen uns zufällig noch ein paar Leute entgegen. Das war eine Yoga-Gruppe, die zu diesem Zeitpunkt in Templehouse zu Gast war, um ihre Yoga-Kurse zu machen. Wir kamen dann auf die Idee, das wäre doch auch was für uns, für unsere Fotoreisen, weil erstens ist es eine saugeile Location, ein altes Herrenhaus in englischem Stil mit 96 Räume, da kann man sicher toll fotografieren, mit oder ohne Models, mit Kamera auf Entdeckungsreise gehen. Vor allem aber löste das ganze Thema ein Problem, was wir mit unseren Workshops in Irland bis jetzt immer hatten. Und zwar war das der Regen. Allein in diesem Jahr hatten wir teilweise 3 Jahreszeiten innerhalb von 5 Minuten. Ja? Und manche Jahreszeiten gleichzeitig. Regen, Sturm, Sonne oder Sturm oder was auch immer. Und was uns bis jetzt immer gefällt hat, war eben eine Möglichkeit dann, wenn das Wetter wirklich schlecht war, auch weiterarbeiten zu können. Und so ein Gebäude wie jetzt zum Beispiel Templehouse ist dafür natürlich prädestiniert. Und entsprechend haben wir uns jetzt gedacht, wir können ja dort im Frühjahr eine Fotoakademie abhalten. So, und jetzt bist du dran. Wenn du Lust hast, mit ein paar Leuten, die genauso durchgeknallt sind wie wir, die genauso gerne fotografieren wie wir, die genauso gern spannende Dinge und spannende Reisen unternehmen wie wir, zu fotografieren, was Geiles zu erleben, dann kannst du jetzt auf die Homepage fotoerlebnis.eu gehen und dich auf unsere Gästeliste eintragen. Du findest auf fotoerlebnis.eu unter der Rubrik Fotoakademie Templehouse die Möglichkeit, dich einzutragen und vorzumerken. Wir haben jetzt noch keinen genauen Termin, weil wir jedem die Möglichkeit geben wollen, teilnehmen zu können. Fest steht bis jetzt nur, dass die Akademie im Mai oder im Juni für 4 bis 5 Tage stattfinden wird. Wenn ihr euch jetzt über die Homepage eintragt, über das Kontaktformular eintragt, dann könnt ihr darauf noch Einfluss nehmen. Einen groben Programmablauf haben wir schon, den könnt ihr euch angucken, aber auch der kann sich noch ändern. Wenn ihr euch eintragt, kriegt ihr von uns natürlich immer entsprechende Updates. Ansonsten findet ihr natürlich die Shownotes zu diesem Podcast auf unserem Blog erlebnisirland.eu. Und ja, ich wünsche euch jetzt noch ich wünsche dir jetzt noch einen schönen Tag. Wir arbeiten weiter an dem ganzen Thema und wir hören uns wieder ganz, ganz bald auf diesem Podcast. Bis dann, dein bzw. euer Chris.